mini tiskové konferenci s doktorem Gaborem Maté. Je to vaše. Dejte se.
I'm Jitka Menclová from Reflex magazine, from Weekly magazine. I did the article last week on our website, and during the four days, it has on the social media, it has like 4,000 likes, like very
nice.
Much, a lot of.
Yeah.
And the article was about your teaching, about your thoughts, and some of the comments were negative, but most of them, a lot of them were positive.
Sure.
Do you think you have more people who like your teaching or more critics?
How would I know? Because I mean, when you look on YouTube, there's dozens of my talks on YouTube, and some of them has been seen by millions of times. And most of the comments are positive, and some of the comments are negative. But I think from those people who know my work, it's mostly very positive. But there's a lot of people that don't know my work, and there's a few people who misunderstand my work. Now most of the world has never heard of me, so I don't know how they feel about me. They don't know me at all. But what I'm trying to say is, those that come to my work, there's a reason for it. They're attracted to it. So naturally they're going to like it. So the people that look at my work, mostly they like it. Lots of people write me that I've saved their lives, I've changed their existence. But there's a lot of people who don't know anything about it, so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are like waking up, let's say.
Yeah.
And also people in the field of like doctors and,
yeah.
And even the pressure of the pharma, of the big pharmas, it's strong, and a lot of doctors are using their
the old schemes.
Yeah. Well, now look, doctors are a very conservative profession. I was just in London 3 weeks ago, and I went to a play called Dr. Semmelweis. Now maybe you know who Semmelweis was, maybe you don't. Semmelweis was a Hungarian doctor working in Vienna in the 1840s. There's a statue of him in Budapest. And he discovered that when they were delivering babies, the mothers who were delivered by doctors, they died in large numbers because of fever. But the women in the next ward who were delivered by midwives, they didn't, much lower death rate. Now this is before we knew about bacteria. And someone has discovered somehow that the difference was that the doctors didn't wash their hands. They would work with corpses, then somebody would go into labor, they go and deliver the baby. And they didn't wash their hands. So they're infecting their patients. Now Semmelweis didn't know how, because they didn't know about bacteria yet, but he said, let's just wash our hands. So he did. The death rate went down. Semmelweis was laughed out of his profession. He was criticized, he was attacked, the doctors felt threatened, and he ended up dying in an insane asylum in Vienna. And it's like that still, not as vicious, but new ideas, doctors have a hard time with it. And so, my books have been out there. The first book I wrote was 24 years ago. Now, doctors are coming to me now for training, and they're asking me to speak to them. But very few, so that in the medical schools, and it's not about me, the science of trauma, the science of brain development, the science of how the body and the mind can't be separated, how emotions affect people's physical health, how when it comes to multiple sclerosis or addiction or depression or rheumatoid arthritis. There's always childhood trauma and stress. Doctors don't get any training in that. They don't get any training. So it's not that they're too scientific. It's that they don't even look at the science. They only have this very narrow idea of here's the body, here's the mind, here are the diseases of the brain. Now that's beginning to change, but very slowly. The public is waking up much faster. When you see the public is waking up much faster than the medical profession.
So what do you think it should happen?
What should happen?
What should happen?
Well, look, when I wrote my last book, The Myth of Normal, I collected 25,000 articles for over 10 years, many scientific papers, published in major journals, all kinds of books, interviewed all kinds of people about the science of the mind and body unity and the science of trauma. What should happen is, and the average medical doctor, I'm sure here, like everywhere in this world, doesn't get a single lecture on trauma. So when they see an addicted person, when they see a depressed person, they see a person with rheumatoid arthritis, they don't realize that they're dealing with trauma. So they just deal with the symptoms. What should happen is doctors should be educated on trauma. Doctors should be educated on the unity of the mind and the body, which is scientifically not even questionable. So there should be education. Teachers should be educated in trauma, because all the troubled kids, like right now I know here in the Czech Republic is everywhere else, the number of kids who are self-cutting is going up, number of kids vaping is going up, kids being diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit, that's going up. Well, something's going on, and what's going on is more stress, and more trauma. Educators, because teachers, when they see kids' bad behaviors, they just want to control the behavior, punish the child. What's wrong, you know? No, what's going on is the child is traumatized, and on all his behavior, the bullying, the self-cutting, the eating problems, the vaping, they all reflect trauma. And if the teachers could understand that, then instead of, I could go on forever. There's one more point I want to make. The brain develops, if you look at the science of how the brain develops, it begins in the womb, when a woman is pregnant. That means that the prevention of health problems needs to begin at the first prenatal visit, by taking care of the woman's, not just the physical needs, but the emotional needs. Now, I wasn't trained to do that. I delivered a lot of babies, but I never asked about the woman's emotional state. But we know when a woman is stressed, that affects the brain of the baby in the womb. And so the brain development begins before birth, and it continues into adulthood. And I'm quoting an article from Harvard University. If brain development continues into adulthood, that means the school's most important job is not to teach them when the battle of, Austerlitz took place, or who was the name of the man who assassinated Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in 1914, but how do you promote brain development? And how do you promote brain development like any development, depends on the environment. So if the schools are going to be in the business of brain development, then their emphasis would be, how do we create a safe environment for our children, where they feel connected, loved, accepted, encouraged. Then their brains will develop. Then they'll want to know history. Then they'll be curious. Then they'll want to learn facts. So the schools should be in the business of brain development. So teachers need to be taught about how does the human brain develop, and what are the conditions necessary for that, and what does trauma do. And when kids are behaving badly, what does that mean? So the teachers, the law, the average, most of the people who are using drugs, who commit crimes, are traumatized people. We know this from multiple studies. The average lawyer doesn't know that. The average judge doesn't know that. They don't get a single lecture on this. So I'm just suggesting that to begin with, let's educate the educators, let's educate the doctors, let's educate the legal profession. I would like to say let's educate the politicians, but that's even more difficult.
So thank you.
All right.
I think it will take time, but I think we can do as a, let's say, as a parents, we can do. I mean, when we are aware that we have trauma, I mean, we are all traumatized somehow.
Yeah.
So the one point in our life is not to give the trauma to our children.
Exactly. So we have to work on ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe may I ask you to say something a little bit more about this problems with in kids, it's this self-cutting and everything, why it is still growing, increasing?
Yeah, and the question is why?
Why?
Yeah, well, if you look at vaping, kids are trying to change the state of their brains because they're not comfortable. So the nicotine makes life more exciting. Nicotine triggers a chemical in the brain called dopamine. And dopamine is essential for a sense of vitality and energy and curiosity and so on. The question is, why do kids need that? Okay. Self-cutting is not a stupid habit. No habit is stupid. If you ask somebody why they're self-cutting, and I write about this in The Myth of Normal, they'll say, because I'm trying to create a pain that I can handle, to take my mind off the pain inside that I can't handle. When you self-cut, temporarily your brain releases pain-relieving chemicals, endorphins. Endorphins are the body's own pain relievers. They're just like the opiates. And the opiates are pain relievers. Not just physical pain relievers, but emotional pain relievers. So these kids are emotional pain, they cut themselves temporarily, they get emotional pain relief. And as somebody who self-cut told me, when I self-cut, I create a chaos that I can handle as compared with the chaos inside me that I can't handle. So it's actually a pain reliever. Strange to say. Now the question is, why are kids in more pain? Why don't kids feel more alive? Well, that has to do with the stress in modern society, where in their families they don't get the inner peace and the strong sense of themselves that they need. That's not the fault of individual parents. It's we live in a stressed society. I call it a toxic culture. It no longer needs human needs. Does that answer?
Yes. Well, why do kids use this method, this self-cutting? Because the stress was always, but now they use not only, but they prefer this method to.
Well, the self-cutting today is. The numbers are going up all the time, and it's because the real question is, why are so many kids in pain? That they have to do this, not to feel the pain inside. Now, either there's some gene going around, but that's not true, or there's something in the drinking water, or there's something in society. And that's something I'm saying is stress and trauma. A lot of kids are traumatized, not because the parents are even hurting them, because the traumatized kids, you don't have to hurt them. I mean, if you hurt them, that'll traumatize them. But you don't have to hurt them. Little human beings can be hurt not just when bad things happen to them that shouldn't, but also when the good things that should happen don't happen. So when their needs aren't met, they hurt. A little baby, you don't have to hit him. I mean, if you hit him, you're going to hurt him. But you know what you have to do to hurt him? don't pick him up when he's crying. A lot of parents these days are told, don't pick up your crying kid. Let them sleep it off. Do you know any animal that'll let their kids cry and not pick them up? A monkey, a dog, a cat. When the baby's calling for help, the mother will ignore them. No animal will do that. We're telling mothers to do that, for example. And that hurts the baby.
Hello, Mr. Maté. I'm Gabor Maté from Marian Magazine. My first question is very simple. Is there such a thing as a perfect parent, perfect mother or father? And why not?
No. Yeah, there is. If you look at a mother bear or a mother elephant, you know, they're pretty good. You know, human beings, but it's not a question of being perfect. Nobody can be perfect. There's no perfect human being. It's a question, is it good enough? You know, and it's not an individual problem. Like if I phrase it individually, that may look like I'm blaming parents, but I'm not. I'm saying in this society. So here's the thing. If you look at evolution, millions of years, there used to be human-like creatures, hominins, hominin creatures that were early species of human beings. And for millions or hundreds of thousands of years. Our own species, Homo sapiens, we've been around maybe 200,000 years. Now, until the rise of civilization 12,000 years ago, and for many people even after that, we didn't live in cities or even villages. We lived out there in nature, in small groups, 60 or 80 people, hunters, gatherers. The clan was together the whole day. The children were with the parents the whole day. If you study how these small band, no, that was until 12, 30,000 years ago for all of us. If human life can be represented on the face of a clock, then until 6 minutes ago, that's how we lived. 6 minutes ago, the children were with the parents the whole day. Not just with the parents, but with other adults. So they had a deep sense of connection. And they're all connected to the land and the earth and the forest, you know, the nature. So deep connection with nature, deep connection with each other. And it wasn't a question of an individual parent, mother and or father living in a separate home trying to raise a child. The whole clan raised a child. Because their African expression, it takes a village to raise a child. That's what it means. No, those conditions are gone now. And every year they get worse. Parents are more isolated, more stressed. There's not that support. So it's not a question, is there a perfect parent? The question is, what are the conditions that successful parenting requires? And that's community, that's support, that's a functional extended family. So it's not just the individual parent's perfection or lack of perfection, it's the interconnection. And that's totally gone now. So that's what the problem is. Parents all love their kids, they do their best, they're devoted, but they're doing it in a context that doesn't support them. And here it's all about capitalism is all about individuality and competition and aggression, and not only that, if you look at the physiology, if you want to find out how good a marriage is, if it's difficult marriage or not, you know what you do? You can do two things. You can ask the parents, do you fight a lot and what's it like? That's one thing you can do. The other you can do is you can measure the urinary stress hormone levels of the child. When the parents are stressed, the kids are stressed. Lots of studies show that the more and more stressed the parents are, which is not their fault. It's society. But the more stressed the parents are, the more likely the child is to have asthma. And the greater the stress on the parents, the more medication for asthma the child will need. In other words, it's not a question of perfect parents, it's a question of how stressed are the parents. And for example, in Canada there was a study that when mothers were economically stressed, their children had higher stress hormone levels, which made them more prone for illness. So it's all one. So it's not a question of individual perfection.
And how to actually achieve, you were talking about the inner peace and connection ourselves, but sometimes I feel that when I watch media and, for example, today we have a lot of war, conflicts and a lot of violence in the world. Can this fact be also traumatizing for parents and also for the kids?
Well, it depends how they... it's going to be painful and difficult to watch. But it doesn't have to be traumatizing. It can be. So whether something is traumatizing doesn't just depend on the external event. It also depends on how we respond to it and how we handle it. Trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you. So trauma, that's what trauma means. Trauma means a wound. That's exactly what it means. So trauma is, just to give you an example, it's not the blow on the head. The trauma is the concussion. The trauma is not the car accident. The trauma is the broken bones. So there's what happens, and then there's what's that impact inside. So when you're watching a war, or this violence, well, that's a fact of life. It's going to be painful, it's going to be stressful, but not everything that's painful and stressful is traumatic. Everything traumatic is painful and stressful, but not everything that's painful and stressful is traumatic. It's a question of how do we respond to it? And that depends on what we understand, it depends on how we feel about ourselves, it depends on how much trauma am I carrying inside me. So if, for example, in my childhood I experienced a lot of violence, and if I haven't worked it out, then when I see the violence on television, that's going to trigger me. Or maybe I won't watch it, so I won't even know what's going on, because if I find out, I can't handle it. But if I worked on this and I'm no longer carrying this traumatic wound, then I can watch it, I can feel sorrow, I can feel pain, but I don't have to be traumatized. And if the parents are not traumatized, the children won't be either. It depends on the connection between the parent and the child.
And when you are talking about the connection between the child and the parent, maybe some parents realize that they have done some mistakes, and maybe they think it's too late to fix the connection, the relationship. Is it ever too late to fix the relationship?
I hope not. Actually, my son Daniel, with whom I wrote this book, The Myth of Normal, him and I are writing a new book together now. And it's called Hello Again, A Fresh Start for Parents and Their Adult Children. And Daniel's 48. So we're still working on it. Now it's a lot better than it used to be. No, it's never too late. As long as we're alive and there's consciousness, it's never ever too late. It just takes work. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
Hi.
Gabor, I'd like to welcome again in Prague
Thank
for
you.
the second time. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm also CI student.
Okay.
So
What's your name?
George.
George, hi.
Yeah. I'm working in private addiction clinic in Prague.
Yeah.
So first thing, I'd like to invite you, if you have some time, to see our clinic.
I don't
know, this time, maybe next time.
Probably not this time, because I'm teaching and...
I understand. But my question is, can you see some progress in education of the medical schools or
Not much. Slowly. There's also more movement in people, doctors who've already graduated, to get a broader perspective. So there's, in the States, there's something called functional medicine, which is much broader than the traditional medicine. There's integrative medicine, again, is much broader. But these are still fairly small movements. In the official medical schools, well, I'll mention this today, but have you read The Myth of Normal?
I'm started.
You're starting, okay, yeah. Well, I mentioned in it, there's a Hungarian-American doctor who called Soma Weiss, who in 1939 gave a lecture to the medical school class, which was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1940. So we're talking about 83 years ago. And Soma Weiss was so famous and so respected that every year to this day, they have a day in his honor at Harvard University. So every year there's a Soma Weiss Day. And Soma Weiss in 1939 said that emotional factors and psychological factors are as important in the causation of physical illness as physical factors, and they must be at least as important in treating them. He said this 84 years ago. He had no science. He just had his vision. Now, this article was published in the Journal of Medical Association. 4 years ago, I was interviewing a psychiatrist at Harvard University, very well-known psychiatrist, and he said to me that to this day, to talk about mind-body medicine at Harvard is to jeopardize your career. This is 80 years after Soma Weiss. So we're still in the dark ages.
We working in our clinics with clients, mostly addicted.
Yeah.
And we have also young doctors coming to help during the night shifts.
Yeah.
And the good message is they are very fond of your teaching.
That's good.
We also using the movie
The Wisdom
of Trauma
for
for our clients, and it's a pleasure for me to handle your teaching with our clients and also our staff.
Well, thank you. Let me ask you a question though. When those young doctors come to you, have they had any training in trauma before they came to you?
I don't think so. This is the first training of trauma in our clinic.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. Yeah. Well, it's good that they're coming to you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Yeah.
Should I have another question?
It's totally up to you. My boss will tell me when it's over.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was listening to your interview. It was some British podcast with a lady. Doesn't matter, but you mentioned your psychedelic
experience. Yeah.
When you were like 71, is that correct?
About that. Yeah.
About that. That during the experience you had the therapist, you saw your mother in the therapist, and you were excusing yourself for the pain you
causing my mother. Yeah,
caused your mother. So do you think the psychedelic experience could help people with facing their trauma to undergo this treatment? I mean, with the therapist,
well,
the assistant.
Well, you know what? So one of the first great pioneers of psychedelic treatment was a Czech guy, Stanislav Grof.
Yes.
And then it was illegal. So then he started working with breath. He created this holotropic breath work. So psychedelics have been, first of all, Psychedelics has been used for thousands of years by peoples for healing and for spiritual visions, shamans and so on. In modern life, they've been researched. In the 1950s, there was a lot of research on psychedelics. In the 60s, and then it became illegal, and it kind of stopped. Then they started up again more recently. I've been working with psychedelics now for 14 years. They have tremendous potential because they open up the unconscious. So I mean, when I'm lying there with that experience you described, and I wasn't hallucinating. I knew I was 72 years old. I knew this is a therapy session. I knew I took mushrooms. I knew this person was my therapist, but at the same time, I experienced myself as a 1-year-old baby, and she's my mother, and that's when I started crying. I'm so sorry I made your life so difficult. In other words, very early in life, I took on that responsibility. And that's what happens to traumatized kids. And they think it's their fault. Now, psychedelics can open that up with a very strong warning. It has to be in the right context, with somebody who knows what they're doing, who has integrity, who can prepare you, and who can afterwards can help you integrate the experience. So it's not like you do this and you're healed. But they can open up, just like when you have dreams. Every dream tells you some truth about yourself, but you don't understand your dreams. Nobody understands their dreams. Freud said that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. Yeah, except the way he interpreted the dreams was ridiculous. Like if you read his dream interpretations, I mean, they're stupid. You know, he didn't understand anybody's dreams, as far as I'm concerned. Well, the psychedelics, they open up the unconscious, but you're awake. And there's a guide there. So what if you could sit here and saw a movie of your unconscious on the wall there? What am I afraid of? What am I longing for? Who am I really? You know, how much hatred, pain, or anger, or love, or what is inside me? If you just see it projected on the screen, that's what a psychedelic experience can be like. So you can actually learn what you're carrying. Now that doesn't heal you automatically, but it opens up a huge possibility. So yeah, they can be very helpful. They can also create problems if they're not used properly, if they're not integrated properly. So it's not the answer, but it's a good approach if it's used properly.
Mm-hmm. And you yourself, do you feel like an impact on your afterlife or
after the psychedelic?
Yeah.
Well, in the book I talk about an experience. If I talk about that experience and I talk about another experience I had in Peru with another plant called ayahuasca. There are a few people who will do a psychedelic and it totally changes their lives. There are people like that. I'm not like that. I can do the psychedelic, have a beautiful experience, and 2 days later I'm just as stupid as I ever was, you know? Because it takes integration. So yeah, it can open something up. But if you don't keep that door open, if you don't have a practice, if you don't have help, it's just gonna be a memory. So to answer your question, yes, if I pay attention and if I integrate it. If I don't, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Čas se nám naklonil a jestli je nějaká krátká poslední otázka, můžeme.
Můžu?
No.
Tomáš Studio 27. I would like to ask you if how you perceive the society think that young people are trying to change their gender or even their sex, or they are somehow trying to self-determinate them as some person, if it is
Sure.
more medical or if this is their inner real right.
Yeah. Well, first of all, as far as we can tell, there have always been kind of a fluidity or not just a rigid division between genders, but there's been people in between, one or the other. In ancient Greek myth, if you read Aeschylus, the Greek playwright, there's a prophet called Tiresias, and he had breasts. Okay.
I think he was 9 years, 9-year woman. He was 9 years living in a woman body.
Yeah. Okay. And indigenous people often describe. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is I have my brother has a grandchild who was born with female genitalia. You could tell by the time she was 4 years old that she was not comfortable in her female body, and as she hated dresses. She always wanted to dress like a boy. Her voice was always like this, you know. And when she developed breasts, she became a teenager. She sat there like this because she didn't want to show her breasts. So she was always walking around like this. When she was 17, she became very depressed, almost suicidal. When she was 18, she finally said, you know what, I'm a man. And he came out. He had, within a year, he had his breasts removed. Now when you meet him, you see this very proud, broad-shouldered, confident person who's got a girlfriend. And nobody taught her that. The parents had a hard time with it. I mean, when she didn't want to wear dresses, her mothers would go crazy. Why don't you put a dress on? It was real. So I can tell you that at least some of the time, it's absolutely internal to the person. In fact, I would say most of the time. That's my opinion. Yeah, thank you.